Hello and welcome back to Clarkenomics. In this video, we're going to talk about something very important in the world of macroeconomics, something called inflation. So, to kick things off here, just to define inflation, inflation is defined as a rise in the general price level over time. So the key thing here is this is a macroeconomic concept. We're not looking at the small picture, we're looking at the big picture. So when we say price level, we're not talking about the price of one good or two goods or a handful of goods. We're talking about the prices of everything in an economy. So we're looking at a rise in the overall price level over time. Now, what does that mean? It means prices are getting higher, right? That's what the price level going up means. But more specifically, inflation means that because of this, money is losing its value. Inflation causes money to lose its value because if prices are getting higher, the purchasing power of a dollar is decreasing. It can be a tough concept to wrap your head around sometimes, so we're going to use a couple of numbers to help ourselves out. Let's imagine that in the United States, the inflation rate was 10%. It's a lot higher than it actually is in real life, but just for the sake of argument. What that means is the price level, prices, will be 10% higher by the end of the year. That's what that means. So imagine if we had something like a widget, right? Just our typical example, and a widget costs $100 today. Well, that means that a widget will cost 10% more 1 year from today. The price level, assuming the widgets are representative of the prices of everything in the economy, will be 10% higher a year from today. So the question becomes, how much will a widget cost 1 year from today? Well, the answer is $110. That's a 10% increase from 100. And the math that you would use to get there is 100, right, the original amount, times 1 plus the inflation rate as a decimal, and that's going to give you 110. If that looks familiar to you as like when calculating simple interest, you would be correct. So that's a 10% increase. Now let's look at the effect that that has on one's purchasing power. So imagine you have $1,000 in cash today. $1,000 in cash. And as we know, widgets cost $100 each. Well, how many widgets could you buy? Easy enough. You have $1,000 and they cost 100 each. So 1,000 divided by 100 means you could buy 10 widgets today. But let's stick with our 10% inflation example. There is 10% inflation, which means how much cash will you have 1 year from today? Still 1,000, right? You're still going to have that $1,000 in cash. It's not going to just evaporate into the air. If you hide it under your mattress or put it in a safe, you're still going to have $1,000 cash 1 year from today. That's not how inflation gets you. The way inflation gets you is because, well, widgets now cost $110 each. So you still have $1,000, but the widgets are all more expensive. So how many widgets could you afford now? To figure that out, we would do it just like before. 1,000 divided by 110. And if you go ahead and you do that math, 1,000 divided by 110, that's going to give you 9.09. So how many widgets could you afford? 9.09, but since we're not dividing widgets into decimals, we're going to say you can only afford 9 widgets. So what that means is you can afford 10% fewer widgets than you could have before. Your money has lost 10% of its value. So that's how inflation gets you. You might have the same dollar amount as you had before, but now you can't buy as much stuff with those same dollars. So, in other words, $100 a year from today has the purchasing power of $90.91 today. This is how we talk about inflation in reverse here. So if I were to give you the option of having $100 a year from today or giving you $90.91 today, you should be indifferent between those two options other than being able to consume things at different times. So the way to calculate that is right here. You would take $100 and you would divide it by 1 plus 0.1. That's again the rate of inflation as a decimal, and that gives you $90.91. Well, why? Let's reverse everything here. We're just using some simple algebra. Because if you do $90.91 times 1 plus 0.1 in parentheses, that gives you $100. So all we're doing is dividing both sides by 1 plus 0.1. So that cancels out, and it's the same as doing 100 divided by the stuff in parentheses to get that. So we're just rearranging a couple things here and there. So this is a good time to talk about interest rates because inflation and interest rates are really closely tied together. Because if you're a saver, earning interest can protect you from inflation, right? Your money is losing value because of inflation, but what helps your money gain value? Earning interest. So let's throw some numbers on this, see if we can make some more sense out of it. Imagine you have $1,000 in your bank account, not cash this time, it's in a bank account, like a checking or a savings account, something like that. And again, right now, widgets cost $100 each, so you can buy 10 of them. Annual inflation rate's 10%, fine. Widgets, we know they're going to cost $110 at the end of the year. We've already said all that stuff in previous slides. So my question to you is, what interest rate would you need to be earning to still be able to afford 10 widgets at the end of the year? What interest rate would you need to be getting for your bank account to still buy 10 widgets? Because again, you're going to need $1,100 to get those 10 widgets, right? So what kind of interest rate is going to get you $1,100 at the end of the year? Well, you're going to need at least 10% annual interest, right? Because based on the simple interest formula, 1,000 times 1 plus the interest rate as a decimal is going to give you that $1,100 that you'll need when they cost $110 each. So the rule is, and it's a pretty simple rule, if the rate of interest is greater than the rate of inflation, you're going to be better off. If the rate of inflation is higher than the interest rate, your purchasing power is going to decrease. And if the inflation rate is exactly equal to the interest rate, then, in theory, your purchasing power has not changed over time. So, there's something we call nominal interest rates and what we call real interest rates. So, when the inflation rate rises, nominal interest rates rise too. Now, we talked about it from the perspective of a saver, and that should make sense, right? If you're a saver and inflation rates are higher, you're going to go to your bank and you're going to demand higher interest rates because, again, you don't want your money to lose value. So you're going to say, hey, inflation's 10%. I need 10% interest at least, or else my money's going to lose value in your bank. But you can also think about it from the other side. Think about lenders of money. If you lend somebody money today, you don't want to be paid back with dollars that are worth less in the future, right? So if you are a lender of money, you're going to charge the borrower interest because you know if there's inflation going on, the dollars that the borrower is paying you back are not going to be worth as much. Interest is how you can protect yourself as a lender. So when the inflation rate rises and we know money is going to lose value, interest rates go up too. And again, when you're a saver putting your money in the bank, you are a lender of money. So it's the same perspective, just kind of phrased a little differently there. So when we talk about interest rates and inflation and all that, we need to focus on the real interest rate, not the nominal interest rate. Now here's what the nominal interest rate actually is, because I didn't define it earlier. Nominal interest rate is the rate that's like advertised. It's on the signs. It's what the bank says, here's what the interest rate we're going to pay you is. But the real interest rate is what actually matters. And the way to figure out the real interest rate is actually very, very simple. It's just nominal interest rate minus the inflation rate. So again, because prices change and inflation distorts everything, we can't just look at a nominal interest rate to see what kind of a rate we're going to get. We need to look at the real interest rate. So for instance, the nominal advertised interest rate is 10%. The bank's telling you, hey, we're going to pay you 10% interest. But at the same time, there's 8% inflation. And so we need to do 10%, which is the nominal interest rate, minus 8%, which is the inflation rate. By the way, we're assuming these are all annualized rates. And what that really means is you're going to only get 2% in real interest. Now, is your purchasing power increasing? Yeah, but not by 10%. It's increasing by only 2% because inflation erodes 8% of the value of your money over that time. So you have to look at the real interest rate because that's actually going to tell you what's going to happen to your purchasing power. Now, through all this, you might be thinking, well, what if everyone just earned more money? Like, let's say we had 10% inflation, but during that time, everybody got a 10% raise. Wouldn't everybody be just fine? And the answer is, well, yes and no. You're right, people would have the same purchasing power as before, but in real life, things don't work like this. This only happens in the long run. In the short run, wages are what we call sticky. That's an actual economic term. I didn't just make that up. In the real world, prices adjust a lot faster typically than wages do. Wages don't adjust right away. Why? Well, a lot of times when you have a job, you sign a contract, and that contract says, here's how much we're going to pay you. And you might be able to renegotiate that contract at a later date. Let's say you can get a different wage every year. Like I'm a teacher. Every year my salary goes up. But that's just once a year. Throughout that year, what's happening to the prices of things? Well, the prices of things are rising throughout the year. So prices typically rise faster than wages do, which means in the meantime, people are losing real purchasing power. Beyond that, there are other types of costs associated with inflation that I'm not going to get into, things like menu costs, shoe leather costs, unit of account costs. But what you need to know in the meantime is, inflation does have real effects on people's lives because of the stickiness of wages. They don't change at the same pace that prices do. So those are some inflation basics. Thank you for watching.